Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover the anime new highlights for the third week of February 2022, and we would also give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Zetman. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic, and with me as always is Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, you have been hyping up a Mongolian story for me these past few days, and I really wanted to hear about it, because you said you helped a Mongolian become more Mongolian or something else like that?
Yes. So I think as I phrased it in my message to you, I think I said it was like I helped a Mongolian be Mongolian in front of other Mongolians about Mongolian history or something akin to that. So it's very interesting, the dynamic, or at least the relationship between countryside and city life people here, where in the countryside, you have a lot of more traditional activities, being like building a yurt or a gear, like those mobile houses that you see, the giant tents that you see in Mongolian, whenever you see Mongolians depicted in movies. And then like some kids games, like we talked about hopscotch being kind of like transnational, but there's like some very specific Mongolian games that involve ankle bones of sheeps. And how the game is played basically is played like Chinese marbles. It's basically the equivalent of, I would say, dominoes with the cross of Chinese marbles. And my youngest teacher, part of my department, so like she's my kohai, throwing some Japanese there. But yeah, she is a UB or capital city girl. Her parents raised her here. She's never really been to the countryside. She doesn't have any grandparents that live in the countryside. So she's basically a city kid. And for this week, it was basically a cultural week. And as the youngest, she's responsible for showing, the traditions have continually passed on to the next generation. And the people in charge of the event are like the oldest or the elderly teachers of our school. So there's teachers of like 60, 63 years old in charge of the event. And my kohai comes to me, is like, she doesn't say Jay Sensei, but she just says Jay, and I was like, yes, and she's like, I don't know how to play any of these games. Can you tell me how to play? And I run her through the instructions of how to play the game very quickly. Like I take her aside and like kind of instruct her, because she needs to explain how the games are being played to the other foreign teachers. Again, foreign teachers here don't really take the initiative to learn Mongolian. It's not really demanded of them at all to like take that burden of being an English teacher and then also learning another language on top of that. So she's supposed to explain to us what these games are. And she's explaining. She's doing a very good job. She followed my instructions pretty well, but she's making a few mistakes, and I go up to her and basically help her out a little bit. And the elderly teachers see that, and they tell me, oh, you're such a good teacher. Because it's kind of known that I'm the only foreign teacher that speaks Mongolian. I was the only foreigner that was wearing traditional Mongolian clothing, as well as like was able to speak Mongolian for like the riddles and tongue twisters.
That's why you're in that bomb-ass getup that you sent me the other day. So it was for that, dude, like, seriously, like, you looked like, if, like, Wesker, like, went to, like, Tibet or something else like that. You really dressed like you were fire. So that's what that outfit was from.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of similar to the Japanese kimono or the Korean horog, but it's kind of shares the same roots in like Chinese ancient war dress. So like I was doing all the cultural things, and it was like one of those proud moments of being a foreigner. It's not like I know your culture better than you do. It was just a moment of, I am integrated enough to appreciate the culture in its full respective form, and people recognize that in you. And that's just such a good feeling. So I was having a bit of a high. So just wanted to share that was a very interesting first time event after being here for so long. It was like, oh yeah, people do care that you try to learn their culture, and it reflects that.
No, that's really good, and I'm glad that you took those steps too, because as you said, it's it's sort of mind-boggling that people would go and live in other countries, doing other things, and they would not take the time to learn the country's culture. I would see that in my own culture, in a sense. Like I'm part Colombian, and some of my relatives, when they moved here to the States, they essentially stayed with other Colombians or within the Spanish community. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you want to you have that commonality. So like you move to another country, you look for people who have commonalities with you so that you can develop relationships and things like that. But there are people in that community that limit themselves by only going to the Spanish speaking parts. Like some of them don't know how to read English, and some of them don't know how to speak English. But they keep themselves in that sort of Spanish echo chamber to where they don't have to learn the culture of the country that they live in. And it's kind of sad, because again, as I said, you're limiting yourself. So to hear that you're out there essentially as you said, not showing up as teacher, but you're being a proper teacher, teaching another teacher how to teach things that the teacher should know. And it's also interesting too, because the way that you described your city, I never really thought that it was in the countryside. I thought that it was. I knew that it wasn't necessarily near the capital, but from what you said to me, like it seemed like your school was in what was in a metropolitan area, and that you had to go to the countryside sometimes. But I didn't realize that the city that you're in right now is considered the countryside, for real, for real.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's a weird boundary line. So I think the closest comparison I can make is like the suburbs are like right outside of a major city. So like if you ever look at like Los Angeles, and then you have the hills, like you can still see the city, but you're far enough that it is a difficult journey to get into the city, I guess. So it's like a border between like the city, the outer rim of the city, and then the countryside. So I wasn't really surprised when she came to me and asked me for help. And I'm glad to hear that you kind of have a similar experience, because it always is a case of like blending cultures together. Because I know you're advancing your Spanish skills, but like you're doing it in a very like not formal way. You're picking it up by yourself and like doing training by yourself. And then that whenever culture blends together, you don't know where something's coming from technically. So when you have isolated pockets of foreigners, you're like, oh, this is like authentic, whatever the culture is. But then you leave that culture and you're like, oh, where is it and how has it changed over time? So it's very interesting that you've seen it from like both perspectives.
It's funny that you say that, because you would get that with Puerto Ricans, right? So, for instance, Puerto Ricans in New York, their culture is different from Puerto Ricans who are actually from Puerto Rico. And it's a bit funny, because even with the Spanish that they use, in New York, it's more Spanglish, where you have English and Spanish, and it's more slang. And so where you have people that come straight from Puerto Rico, there's that bit of a schism where it's like, oh, it's like you're from New York, you're not really Puerto Rican, because you talk in Spanglish instead of like full blown Spanish. So like you get different cultural divides that way. But Jay, you have the news this week. Do we want to get started there?
Oh yeah, sounds awesome, because we can move into the first news story of the episode. And as always, time codes are going to be in description. We always have two segments. Well, most of the time we have two segments of the news of the week, as well as our review, our 10-year anniversary review. So going from your merchandise into the news story merchandise, the first news story is that the Sound Hashira's Nishi-Rin swords will be getting a life-size replication or replica made. And this is by a company called Tamashii Nations, and they have done a lot of other of the swords from Demon Slayer series. They've done Inosuke, they've done Zenitsu, they've done Tanjiro, they've done Rengoku. So like all the major players. I don't think they've gotten to the other Hashira yet, but This is actually doubling as a double news story because also this week it was announced that season 3 is coming.
So excited! I was so excited.
Be the Swordsmith village arc, and yeah, there's a lot of hype around it because of the 2 other Hashras that. So it seems to be that each season is going to introduce I believe 9 Hashra in total, but the next Hashras are the Love Hashra, and I don't actually know what the other Hashra
I think
is.
he's missed.
Oh, yeah, Mist. Yeah, he's the Mist Hashra. But yeah, so these Nichirin swords are like life size. They are 1 meter long. They're going to be able to play sounds of the Hashra Yuzuri's lines from the film or from the episode or from the arc, sorry. And then battle sounds as of his breathing styles, and then also it's also going to be will be able to play the opening theme from the entertainment district. So it's doing a lot. So are you interested in buying swords, Sam?
So it's funny that you say this because, like, looking at this, like, I felt highlighted a little bit because literally after the last episode of Demon Slayer, I went online to look it up to see if there were any replica swords made for Uzui, because I do have some swords. I have Toshiro Hitugaya's sword from Bleach, and I also have Trafalgar Law's sword from One Piece. And I have been wanting to buy more. Like, I wanted to get Rin's sword from Blue Exorcist. I was also looking into getting Ichigo's sword, as well as, I forget his name, the main dude from Fate Stay Night. I was gonna get Archer's dual blades, the black and the white one with the yin and yang symbol on it. And the swords that I get, I like to have them where they're actually made out of metal. I don't want to have wooden replicas. And when I was looking online, especially for Demon Slayer swords, that was all that I could really find. But I think also because of what's been going on with the pandemic, it really rose up the price because people aren't going in and making them anymore, or they're not going into the factories or manufacturing places to make them because of the uh, restriction guidelines. So, like, the prices are definitely inflated. For instance, when I had bought my Toshira Hitugaya sword, it was maybe $30, $40. And this was, I think, about 4 years ago. And now when I'm looking online, just for the wooden replicas, it's about $50. And I want to say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, because I think, like, I looked for some of the Nichirin swords, and like it mentioned it singing and things like that. But I want to say the price for that, it's like maybe 129 or something like that. Or am I completely off base with that?
Yeah, so right now it's being done through Premium Bandai, which
Mm-hmm.
you should have an account.
I know. I need to make that.
Yeah, but there is a good reason why most Americans actually don't have a Premium Bandai account because they don't actually deliver to the United States. And that's kind of a bummer because when you look up where you can find the Nichirin swords, they they GPS your computer's location. So when you go to their website, it only shows you your region. So they have like 5 regions in total, and if you click anything but the United States, they show the Nichirin swords. So
Oh my
the
goodness.
Uzui ones go for 228 US. And just
Okay.
to describe how they look, because I think it's a beautiful design for swords. I think he has the most interesting swords out of the Hashra, but they are basically twin cleavers essentially with
Mm-hmm.
a circular notch taken out of the middle, but they're also connected by a chain at the hilt, so they serve as nunchucks. So it's a pretty sweet design. He uses them very much like a nunchucks when uh, bad stuff happens to him in the arc. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting buy. But yeah, let's move on because
Real quick, because I wanted to ask, like, with these swords, or at least the ones that could sing, are they wooden or are they metal replicas?
there was no mention. I was looking at the official, like, the listing of the materials. It didn't actually say what
Mm-hmm.
the materials was, but given that they produce, a lot of recorded sounds, I'm assuming the hilts have like electronics in it, and the
Yeah.
weight of it wasn't listed as well. So it's hard to say if it's metal or wood.
Like I said, I was just curious on that. So onwards to the next bit of news that you have for us.
All right, cool. So this is somewhat of a backtrack because last week we had the news of the Crunchyroll Award winners, so we couldn't really cover the news. But announced last week is that Jujutsu Kaisen will be receiving a second season in 2023. And yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's what I was waiting for.
Yes. So it's funny because I want to say it was around the same time that this news came out. I had found the I found the prequel manga for Jujutsu Kaisen, where it was the Zero novel, which is what the movie is supposed to be about, and I am so excited for all of it. The movie, the new season, everything.
Yeah, because it's kind of a forgettable fact since it's been circulating in the community for so long. But yeah, the first season came out in October 2022, so it is definitely time for the second season to be upon us. But it's just a weird thing that Studio Mappa hasn't officially announced that they're doing it, which I
Mm-hmm.
assume that they are doing it. They just haven't made the announcement yet because they don't do a lot of sequels. They've only done, to my knowledge, Zombieland Saga, which is like one of those understated properties that they don't have to put their best of the best AS tier on it. So
Yeah.
the only thing about the story, I mean, other than pure excitement, is that it is going to have a rebroadcasting of the first season, so we can kind of actually project when it's going to be released. At most, it's going to be released this winter, or this coming winter of
Mm-hmm.
2023. So we only have a few months to wait, really. So excitement is properly earned.
That's actually very smart. Like you said, to have a rebroadcasting of the first season. So what that would do is that would bring in new viewers. That would also give the old viewers a recap, as well as hyping up the new season that's coming out. That's a good way to do things for works that have like that time period or that time gap between seasons. I mean, it's only been what, maybe a year or so between season one and season two.
Exactly, yeah. So it might run into a thing of like catching up. I mean, it won't probably eclipse because like My Hero Academia has been basically one season and a half ahead
Mm-hmm.
of the anime release from the manga release. So it seems like Kaisen's or JJK is going to be in the same ballpark of giving the manga enough time so it doesn't eclipse it. But uh, no idea from the author, who is using a pen name and we don't really know their identity. So they haven't really identified when JJK is going to end. But comparing to
Mm-hmm.
Demon Slayer, which is only like 26, 28, or 23 volumes, if JJK is going to be equally as short, then we could look for like 3 seasons or 4 seasons and then just wrap it up and it won't ever eclipse it. But if that's on that, then we can keep it moving because I am excited. Yeah, I'm excited about this because I always put in some Sam centric news. So for our third news story is that the Shin Japan Heroes Universe project has been announced. And this is a very odd announcement at, I don't know, a very weird time. It kind of makes sense because the force behind this program or this collaboration project is Hideki Anno, who has, or is at least known for his Evangelion series. And with
Mm-hmm.
Evangelion wrapping up, it does make sense that he's doing a little bit more to promote, I mean, his other projects, because he's done a lot of work. He was the writer on Shin Godzilla, which I still say is like one of the best Godzilla movies out there compared to like the 2014 Godzilla. and then he's also done Ultraman, he's done Kamen Rider, and these are all going to be in basically a connected shared universe because in May of this year there's going to be Shin Ultraman, and next year there's going to be Shin Kamen Rider. So all this is Sam focused. So Sam, you have any thoughts on this?
It's funny because before the podcast, I mentioned there were two news articles I was somewhat familiar with. Uzui being one of them, and this is being the other. I had gotten a blurb, and I'm intrigued. I am a little confused on how they're going to connect Evangelion to anything because of what happens in Evangelion. It basically like the whole Earth is Dunzo. However, I can see them connecting Ultraman and Godzilla a little bit. I can see that being easier to do, and I just love Kamen Rider. Like having Kamen Rider being tied in with Ultraman. I can see that happening very very well. But the thing is, like with Kamen Rider, how is Kamen Rider going to be on the same par with Godzilla, Ultraman, and Evangelion? Because even though Kamen Rider has similar Super Sentai energy, they don't have giant robots. I mean, the biggest thing that they can have is maybe his or her motorcycle would transform into this exoskeleton thing, or maybe they'll have a mini robot that's probably 15 meters high or something along those lines, but they're not known for having something that's gigantic that's just gigantic like Godzilla size or Ultraman size, something like that. So it would just be very very interesting to see how the universes are connected. Maybe Evangelion is just the far off future of Earth. Like maybe they'd have a shared timeline, things of that nature. But if it's all done by the same guy, I think we've talked about Ano doing Kamen Rider once before in another news story, and I'm very very excited to see what his take on Kamen Rider is going to be.
Yeah, so it is somewhat in a shared universe. So it says it uses the word tie-in, so it does feel a little bit similar maybe to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that there are movies that don't interconnect, but there are like loose threads between them. So it's being done by the major studios in charge of each property: Toho for Godzilla, Toei for Ultraman. I think I'm maybe misconnecting them, but and then Hara is the animation studio. So they're doing collaboration events, they're doing merchandise, they're doing these films are all in somewhat of the same canon. So over the next year or two, since the Shin Kamen Rider is coming out next year, it's going to be all like Ano-centric things. And I think that's something he's earned after giving, Evangelion fans like 2 decades of his life. Yeah, so we got 2 more news stories, and they're pretty much a quick wrap up. So the next to last news story is that there will be a somewhat of a celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Full Metal Alchemist anime, where there was a teaser release very recently showing Scar and his like known tattoo arm of destruction. And that's basically it. We have news because we'll report on this in a couple more weeks when there's an official event released on March 2nd. But Sam, would you be interested in another live action Full Metal Alchemist property?
I'm not sure because the first one wasn't all that good. Maybe if it's done by another studio or a different director. And I understand that with renditions, like with movies, like you have certain creative liberties that you can take. But with the last live action Full Metal Alchemist movie, it seemed very much akin to the Marvel Iron Man anime, where it looked like Iron Man, it tried to be like Iron Man, but it was just missing like the soul of Iron Man, of what made Iron Man Iron Man. And like it, I would say that the live action Full Metal Alchemist was somewhat similar in that regard, where it was trying to look and act like Full Metal Alchemist, but it lost its heart a little bit. So I don't know if it was because it was trying to do too much or the things like that. And we've always had issues with proper live action anime adaptations, but hopefully they took cues from, say, Alita Battle Angel or Edge of Tomorrow. I'm trying to think of what was the or Rurouni Kenshin. Hopefully they took cues from those and saw what made those good, and this second live action adaptation would, make people want to see more live action adaptations of anime.
Right, because it always seems to be with these adaptations that they adhere like very strictly to fidelity, meaning that they just need to recreate the story, and that's not always in the best interest of the medium because it's been changed. It's not an animation TV show anymore. It's now a movie with a dedicated runtime or a isolated runtime. So you can't just string people along with like, oh, we'll finish up in a follow-up movie. You have to tell an isolated story, and if they're going to do anything, I hope that they do somewhat of what they should have done with Cowboy Bebop, most recently done by Netflix, is that they do take the story in a not different direction, but they add on to the canon essentially. Because again, a lot of the things that Alphonse and Al does in the series, the two main characters, are a lot of side quests, especially with the first series that they did, not Brotherhood, because there are the two animes, there's the OVAs, there's the two films, and the live action. So there's enough material to know the characters and then bring that spirit, like you said, into it, but not necessarily just recreate the anime. Like explore something new that the first anime did like very frequently. That they just created stories out of nowhere, like expanding on like the homunculus, the villains of the series, backstories, giving them more humanity. So when bad stuff happens to them, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of feel that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sorry, just to expand on what you were saying, like that was what the Sacred Star of Milos did, right? It basically took a side quest that Ed and Al did and just expanded upon that. So, like, if they did something like that, that would be interesting.
Exactly. So we'll come back to this news story when there's the official event on March 2nd. And now for our last news story of the day, and this comes about some of the video game news that was released this week because of the recent Nintendo Direct. But I don't have a Wii U, I don't have a 3DS, but the eShop for both of those systems is going to shut down officially this March, or sorry, March of next year. So it is somewhat of a kind of sad, not putting your dog out to pasture or anything, but the 3DS was originally launched in 2011. The Wii U was launched in 2012. So they just had their 10-year anniversary, and it makes sense for how much demand there is for the Nintendo Switch that they can't really give the server space or however they computed the need for that. But it was funny on TikTok. On Instagram, I saw a lot of people. Why it came up for anime is that people have like Crunchyroll accounts on their Wii U's, and that's how. And they were just like blah, blah, that kind of sad sound of like, oh yeah, now I have to switch over to the Switch or something because all of those online services are going to end within the next year. But I know you don't have a Wii U. I don't know you don't have a 3DS, Sam. But was there anything from the Nintendo Direct that caught your attention or that flowed into your news feed?
Not really. I would say the thing that reminds me about this because I'm a Sony guy, so like all I had was PlayStation, and it sort of reminds me of like when the PlayStation 4 first came out, how they were trying to shift the direction to the newer gen consoles, saying how like there wasn't going to be any backwards compatibility. And I was hella pissed when that came out because I have so many PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 games. So, like I want to be able to keep playing them. But it sort of is something that the game industry needs to do. So because you have more products coming out, you're trying to push people, try to push your technology, try to push the boundaries that way. And for you to, in order to do that, you have to sort of let go of the old. Now, however, they were saying that I think with the newer version of the PS5, there should be backwards compatibility, and they also have other stuff on the online store where you can buy the older games. But I don't, there's just something nostalgic about being able to play some of like your older games on some of the newer consoles, things of that nature. And like you said, it is sort of sad, and I didn't realize that the Wii U was that old. I thought that it was a lot newer than that. I it was weird because in my mind I thought that the 3DS was a lot older than the Wii U. So it's very interesting learning that they're only a year apart.
Right, yeah. And I only picked this news story because of the Sega story that we talked about like a couple of weeks ago. It kind of feels like in the same space of like, it does make sense that they're closing up shop for this very old system. And it's not probably a promotion for like the Switch 2, but it's like things of like the Mario Kart 8 came out on the Wii U and it was re-released for the Switch. And part of the direct was saying, oh, we're going to update, remaster some of the old Mario Kart 64 games, the Double Dash games, and just put it on Nintendo or put it on the Switch for the Mario Kart 8. So it's like, yeah, a lot of that old stuff is coming back around. So it's like keep pushing forward that agenda of nothing with Nintendo really loses value. And even like in the direct, they announced that No Man's Sky is coming to Switch. I was like, oh, I can finally play No Man's Sky. So very about a lot of things. So Mario Soccer was announced, and a new Kirby game that's kind of akin to Mario Odyssey is going to be coming out as well. So those are a few of the.
It's been a while
Nintendo
since they've
properties.
released a Kirby game.
Right. Yeah, Kirby getting some representation finally. But yeah, that is it for the news story, Sam. And now we're to finally, a choice of yours for our 10-year review. And you got to choose Zetman. So what's up with this anime? Why did it make your list, and why is it good or not?
Yes. So, as always, Jay, thank you for the news. To the audience, time codes, descriptions. We are now going to the meat and potatoes of the episode. Hopefully, I don't get flagged by using that phrase. Hopefully, me borrowing that from somebody else. I'm trying to honor another YouTuber. Okay, so onward and upwards in regards to Zetman. All right, so the reason why I had chosen Zetman is because when I was in university, I was in the mature. I started gravitating towards the more mature, or I think it's seinen. Is that the word for the older boy genre? Jay.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, more towards seinen works, such as Gantz and Wolf Guy, and Zetman was the third that I was keeping up with, mainly just dealing with like the darker tones and more mature aspects of what makes a story. And when and it was very interesting because as I was getting into Zetman, the anime was coming out around the same time. So I read a lot of the Zetman manga, and watching the anime, I really have strong opinions and feelings about this anime. And the reason why I chose it for this, for us to rewatch it, is mainly to see if my ideals hold up, if I was validated in my opinions, and mainly to pick your brain about it because I didn't think that this would be something that was on your radar or if you would have picked it up, mainly because of the focus of the material. And again, I sort of want to get your opinion and to see if it sort of validates my own opinion on this work. And essentially, would you like to give the summary, or would you like for me to give the summary?
Oh, yeah, it's your anime, so you got it.
Essentially, what we do in this anime, we follow this young boy known as Kanzaki Jin, and we are seen with him and his grandfather. They are homeless vagabonds, and essentially there is a corporate, not necessarily corporate, but we essentially see Jin try to grow up and like his grandfather be a good mentor teacher, and then we see that tragedy befalls the homeless community that Jin is a part of, and we are essentially watching Jin grow up, and we learn that Jin is not a normal boy, as he has superhuman strength as well as a physical deformity on his left hand that seems to be the source of his strength. And throughout the story, we see his body change in a sort of not necessarily a Super Sentai fashion, but like in a werewolf transformation type thing whenever he does get into these very intense action scenes sequences, and we get to see how his interpersonal relationships are affected by these different things that are happening, because we also learn that there are all, acts of violence that are happening throughout the city that people can't really explain. You know, people being cut in certain ways that shouldn't be possible, or people being burned by a serial arsonist, things of that nature. And we also begin to see that there is a corporate uh, entity that happens to be at the scene or is pursuing these events. So throughout the story, we get to unravel the relationship between said corporate entity and these quote unquote isolated incidents, along with Jin's backstory. So that all that is to say, like watching this, it definitely gives off, like I said, a sort of pseudo Super Sentai vibe, more akin to Kamen Rider, where it's that sort of mature type setup. And this work was made by Studio TMS Entertainment. It is in the demographic for seinen. It's a rating of rated R, and this is available on Amazon. However, you have to use a VPN in order to watch it. So, Jay, giving like after hearing or at least being exposed to this, was this your first time watching Zetman, or tell me a little bit about your exposure to it and your thoughts on it?
This was the first time I've ever heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were going through the list of anime for 2012, that this didn't really catch my eye because of it has a very interesting aesthetic to it that I couldn't really place my finger on until I watched all three of the first episodes, which is our standard measure of what we're talking about and what we consider not spoilers. But it's the same artistic style that the Marvel anime is in, that's done by Studio Madhouse. It's a very harsh line design to their characters, and I was like kind of pondering and looking over like the credits about why that is, and it's like there's no shared character designer of the Madhouse Marvel anime. It's just something that has been akin to basically using modern technology to replicate the look of old 80s cartoons. And the thing that I took away from this is that this is the kind of perfect introduction anime to people that don't watch anime. And you can kind of say that to the effect that people always say, oh, just choose a Ghibli film. And that's never the case because Ghibli's Ghibli.
So that's very, very interesting. Okay, so I'm sorry, continue. Why should they start off with Zetman?
Because one, it's mature, and I guess maybe speaking to our age demographic, is that if you're talking about what's anime, like the 80s were like the most anime, I guess, because you can talk about well choreographed fight scenes. So like Jin in his first episode, where in the other episode it skips a little bit ahead in his life. But in the first episode, he's a kid and he's like super strong, super fast. He saves a lady, but he's doing it because he's a hobo, and like Japanese people generally give out tokens of appreciation in those moments of heroism. And like well choreographed action scenes, like I said, from when he transforms and taps into his powers for the first time. There was very much random nakedness, nudity in the first episode, which is also, a marker or hallmark of anime, as well as over exaggerated expressions and mannerisms. So it just feels like so anime about it, and it's not something that you can like say is like with shonen, like Dragon Ball Z or anything. Like shonen is like very specific to an age demographic, but this is just so well rounded in its first premise, even though it opens up with a lot of gore, which again I'm not really keen to. But it does feel like situated in that this is something I feel comfortable introducing to anybody. Sorry, introducing to people that say, "Oh, I don't like anime." Well, watch this. Watch these first 3 episodes. Watch this hour and
Watch
see if
this
you don't.
and then tell me what you think. I really like your comparison to the '80s films because sitting back and thinking about this material, as I had mentioned before, I was watching, or not watching, but I was reading Wolf Guy and Zetman in tandem around the same time, and the common thread between the two was that the main character has this 80s stoicism that they have, and it's sort of like retold in a modern day situation, right? Whereas as we see Jin, right? Even when he's older, he's slim and he's toned. He's not the Rocky or the Stallone stacked house super muscularly person, but the way that he carries himself, it's very stoic. He has few words, but you can tell that he has emotion, and just the way that he carries himself, it was just done very very well because not a lot of people can write stoicism in a good way, and that was one of the reasons why, at least like ruminating on it, that was one of the reasons why I had continued with the franchise, and I'm very glad that you were able to pick up on that. And you were saying that I guess like after watching this, you said that it was a nice solid 3 episode test. I guess like was there anything particular that what was a good takeaway from it? Did you feel as though the story was told in a good way? Did it have good pacing? Things of that nature. You said there was random nudity, but like, do you feel as though it was just random enough, or was it too random?
No, it's like again why animes really hit for me now is that when it's actually based inside of the Japanese culture, it's not just a fantastical story that happens in Japan. So like we talked a little bit about that. Why would Tony Stark be in Japan for this reason? But yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that moment where there is nudity is because that Japanese people are more not fond, but they're more open with their body nudity, especially when you're in the bathroom, which is where it happens. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that because it's such a nonchalant, not it's presented here in a very nonchalant way, where in other animes it's like exaggerated, like, oh, don't look at me. It's like a very Western kind of interpretation of it. But yeah, the thing about the first 3 episodes is that really surprised me is that I thought it was going to be a transformation anime where, or the Super Sentai, like you said, anime
Yeah.
where the boy becomes a man when he uses a superpower. But no, it skips a couple of years between episode 1 and episode 2 to see like what happens after his first activation of his powers in the first episode. And I was kind of disappointed at that because there was this moment of he gave me like Killua vibes,
Yeah.
where he like brutally kills like a chameleon monster, but it's the first iteration of Hunter x Hunter. back in was it 87 when the first?
I believe it was 87. Yeah.
It was like it feels like it feels the same vibes of that moment, and I was like kind of disappointed that they didn't go with the approach of he has to learn his abilities, but when he turns into Zetman, he's the older version of himself. It's like one of those the perfect escapism for like, oh, my cool older self, and that's who I'm going to grow up into. So I'm very interested to see that they did a time skip instead. And
Mm-hmm.
there is like then in the third episode there's very obscene violence. I mean, in episode 2 as well, but get to the third episode where they basically shoot his mom in the head, and I was like, whoa, what's that? I paused it, so I watched the 3 episodes straight. But
you're like, what just happened? Why did they do this?
Yeah, because like you feel for Jin, because he in the first episode he watched his grandfather caretaker die, and then you see his mom get taken from him, and then for the rest of the episode he's stoic and stoic and stoic, and I'm like, I would be feral at this point. And he's listening to this Dr. Wiley looking
Yes.
scientist monologue about the good of tapping into his powers and why he's needed, and then reveals, oh no, it was just a clone, or however that resolved itself, but you still need to protect your mom, so you still need to come work for us. No way, no how am I working with these people that put on this demonstration to say that they need me. It's very much Evangelion with that kind of dark cynicism about using children for weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like such, like what you said, it's like well written to the point of you can't stop watching. I only stopped watching because of, we have to come and talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's so good in a short time. Again, giving credit to why I would say this is such a good introduction anime is because it has such strong story beats. And we haven't even talked about the best friend character, how he got abused as a child. His father is like the corporate head, and he now has a sense of, I need to be a superhero, and that's probably going to come into play down the road, and Jin's going to either turn into the bad guy. So there's like so much built into these 3 episodes that it's not boring, it's not slowly paced, it's interesting. The characters are likable, Jin is sympathetic and not too stoic in the way that most anime protags are, that makes you hate them but have a lovable, cute side that makes you stick around. So you see rambling about good things about it. So just to say something negative, I guess.
Well, no, because I'm glad that you did give all those positives, because I was surprisingly enough, I was going to be the negative Nancy, if you'll allow me, because as I said, like, I read the manga first, and so like going into the anime, I thought that it was going to be like a carbon copy type thing.
Okay, so that's actually my negative, though.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. Okay, so go on. Yeah.
Since you are the manga reader, that seems to be the consensus of the anime community around this property. Even I was looking up like just information and tidbits about it, but this is actually on Watch Mojo's most disappointing adaptations list.
Really?
At number 10, and I was like, oh, interesting. And I think it's one of those things of going into it blind and then following up with the manga, and then knowing that it is a better story, and knowing that there is like 20 something volumes, so it could have been like 4 seasons, but I think how it was adapted, it didn't set the right tone, and I think that's what probably you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me more about it.
So essentially, around the time that this anime came out, there was like roughly like maybe 150 chapters at the time. It was a good amount. And as we said before, like usually like one episode equates to like maybe 3 chapters. But dude, it's like they just sped through the story, and like the first episode you cover at least like maybe 20 chapters, and not that much. It's a good jaunt of it. And oh my goodness, the grandfather character, his character is so badass in the manga, and you really get a sense of like when you sit with him and Jin, you get a sense of what he was trying to do. He talks about violence and what the ramifications of violence are, what they may be, and basically trying to teach them, it's like not to be violent to others. And not only that, but you also get a sense of like how the homeless are treated in Japan a little bit. And not only that, but like with the aunt character or the mother character that you mentioned with her work, when tragedy befalls the grandfather, she takes in Jin, and we saw that in the anime that she works at not necessarily a love hotel, but at a establishment similar to like a strip club or something like that. And the way that she gets her scar in the manga is one of her clients gets frustrated that she's not going to work, and he stalks her to the point where he finds out where she lives and basically tries to attack her, and that's where she originally gets her scar from. And Jin is there to stop it, but you get a sense of like the reason why she got cut up is because of Jin, and like that's why he tries to run away from her in the beginning, and why the police officer brings him back saying that she is his hope. Like that's why that line is like resonates so much. And it seems like they were trying to, honestly, it didn't seem like they didn't know like how, like if they were going to be greenlit for a second season. So it seems like they were trying to pack everything in, and there were some things in the anime that they did that were well. For instance, Koga, the best friend character in the anime, they the best friend and Jin, they have an actual relationship. They grew up together. Whereas in the manga, Jin might have known, might have met Koga like later on, like when his powers start to manifest, or like when Koga is out there superheroing. But so like it was good to see them interact from a younger age. However, when you run into the sister character, right, the best friend's sister, the one who works in the soup kitchen, right, that's where you're first introduced to her, and that's how she knows Jin, is because she worked in the soup kitchen with her mom. So like like their relationship was organic, whereas in the anime it's sort of just muddled and muddied. And there were just some things that they could have done. Like it is true that the manga is a much slower pace, and so you're able to digest and take things in and see the intentionality of the creator. And there were certain things in the anime that could have uh, highlighted or emphasized the story in the manga that much more. However, it seemed like, again, it seems as though the studio didn't know how much time or what they were going to be able to do with this franchise. So it seems like they were trying to hurry things along and at least trying to get something out there. And that's understandable, because in that time you don't really know what's going to be picked up and what's not going to be picked up. So if you do get a chance to go into anime, you essentially can take what you can get, right? Because you don't know if it's going to be picked up, or say like the fans may like it, but then the studio would be like, oh no, this is crap. It's similar to what happened to Firefly, right? The fans liked it, but then they got canceled, and even though the fans wanted to come back, like it didn't come back until like it was a movie, and they were still a little butthurt about that. So it's understandable, but it's very, very disappointing because of what was said earlier. Like the manga, the story is so well written. Like there are positive things in the anime that could have been done. But honestly, as you said, like I can understand why it hit Mojo's top 10 list of disappointments. However, I liked listening to your take on it before, because, as I said, I wanted to hear it on whether or not I was just being too hard on the work. And despite you not having any exposure to the manga at all, you were able to appreciate it. If it wasn't so, I guess, is it safe to say that if it wasn't for it being as hyper violent as it was, would you have continued the story?
Continue it? Yes, of course, because there
Mm-hmm.
is this through line that I see, because there's a mystery of again as you're talking about it, like comparing the anime to the manga, it does sound to
Mm-hmm.
be in the same vein of what the Netflix Cowboy Bebop did, of like combining story elements and like mix matching like moments and events together, so to compress it into the same space and sending mixed messages sometimes. But there is this monster element that I like to hiding in plain sight, because it gave me
Mm-hmm.
very much Parasite vibes, which is again like maybe not my top 10 anime of all time, but it's definitely up there, something I've rewatched frequently enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if it does fall in that same vein of hyperviolence that Parasite does, then I'm definitely fine with it. And attached to that, I guess, as a closing thought about why I really enjoyed it, is that I think the character design is so striking. So I did say that it feels very much like that Marvel Madhouse, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Marvel Madhouse Marvel anime, but it does reflect the character design artist, which again I always pay attention to. The same guy that did Hathaway for the most recent
Oh, for
Gundam
the
movie.
Gundam? Okay.
Yeah. So, and I kind of see that as like when you don't try to mimic the 80s aesthetic, then you can kind of see the art or the artist bleed through into what their actual character design would be. But yeah, it's like with the design of Zetman as a character, it's in the third episode, it introduces that this is like an incomplete form. I don't know what his complete form looks like. So there's enough intrigue to it. There's like this old man connected to like two beings, which I didn't know who it was. And then there's the shadow guy with a like clad priestess kind of person behind them that kind of deletes these players, which they're called these
Mm-hmm.
creatures that have been engineered, but they can disguise themselves as humans. So there's enough intrigue, there's well put together action, and besides, the story was easy to follow. So I'm definitely going to give it a resurrect. But Sam, you have more knowledge of it, so do you feel like the manga information in your head is stopping you from enjoying it, or is it enjoyable in spite of that?
I would say it's mainly like the manga info in my head because as I'm watching it, I'm thinking it's like, oh, they could have done this better. It's like I like that they could have taken this scene, done another thing with it. Like so, for instance, there was a scene where we see the best friend how he stops a purse snatcher, right? And then Jin comes in out of the foreground and he kicks him in the face, right? So essentially, what happened in the manga, we followed Jin this entire time, and that happened in the manga, right? And that's where we're first introduced to Jin, trying to try to be a hero for hire, basically stopping robbers and asking for money so that he can take his grandpa out for food and stuff like that. And I was just thinking, like in the first episode, we could have seen that and see his interaction with the best friend, and then in the third episode, because it's essentially a flashback, but then we see it from the best friend's perspective, right? So it's a flashback, but it's adding a new layer to it. And so it's not necessarily like a Naruto flashback where like you're in mid fight and you're rewatching the same memory over and over again. But it's giving you that extra layer, So like that was something that was that they could have done very well with, but because of information with the manga in my head, it's like it's a little bit bittersweet because, as I said, it's like I like it, but they could have done it differently. So I've sort of been on the fence with this, and that's why I wanted to like listen to your verdict on it because Zetman is a very good work, and I would have to say, in terms of I guess just to compare the work to, I would say it like that Zetman is like the Berserk version of Common Rider, in the sense of like where the mature levels of the story goes, and it's just done very well. You get to see like the interpersonal characters, However, you said that, you enjoyed the story very well. So, like, somebody who's new, who doesn't know anything about the story can enjoy it. However, as as the manga reader, it's just like I like the original source material so much. Like it again, it prevents me from enjoying the anime. So it's very hard. I want it to be redone, but I feel like if it's reburied, it's just going to be dead in the water. Nobody's going to try to pick it up because of the initial backlash that the manga readers had for this property. It's kind of hard. But I would still stick with my rebury verdict because I feel like a better version of this can be done. But that was sort of another thing that I wanted to do with this episode, was sort of just bring awareness to the manga, because I feel like it's a little too underground and underappreciated, and it's actually very, very good. So I do appreciate that you liked the anime, but I guess, like, as you said, like, I just have the manga in my head stopping me from enjoying it.
Yeah, that's fair. And interesting enough, because the anime came out in 2012 and the manga came out in 2020 or 2002, so technically we're celebrating both the 10-year anniversary of the anime and the 20th anniversary of the manga, so it's very interesting. So we might do like something like that, since we talked about Full Metal Alchemist having its 20th anniversary last year, so we might have to start doing something like that, like looking at animes that have adaptations of very old properties. But yeah, it seems to be a interesting enough series or manga series where it had like 20 volumes, but it was based off of like a 4-shot back in the 80s, and that's why it has that 80 vibe aesthetic to it, the stoicism, like you said. So yeah, you're giving it a rebury, I'm giving it a resurrect. So that's interesting. Good.
Yeah. So, do you have any final thoughts before, like, on Zetman, before we go to our closing remarks?
No, I'm going to probably watch the rest of it now after we close up for the day. But yeah, the next episode is it my choice again? Because
I believe so. Yep, it's Hiro no Kakera, and we're still in that sort of pseudo supernatural vein, but now we're going to be looking at the romance aspect of it, because I think this is another series that's based off of, I forgot what it's called. It's similar to Demon Snow, where you can choose a different love interest.
Oh, Otome game, so maiden game.
Yeah, I would say, like, it seems like, I was looking at the synopsis for it. It seemed to have like similar vibes to that. But yeah, exactly like what you said, Jay. We are going to be going over Hiro no Kakera on our next episode. And with that, we have done our review regarding Zetman. We hope you enjoyed it. And Jay, what have you got for us today?
All right, I got a news report here. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Zetman!